So recently there's been talks of the old 5-star standard banner characters getting buffed. I think this is awesome because I would like all of the characters to stay relevant throughout Wuthering Wave's lifespan. And so I'm very excited to share my personal ideas for how you could buff up these standard banner 5-stars today. I'm Endgame Systems, a channel dedicated to the endgame of Wuthering Waves, and today we'll be discussing how we can buff the standard banner 5-stars to be more competitive with the current landscape of Wuthering Waves. The way that I'm going to be buffing these characters are going to be split into 2 sections. So first, I'm going to add a baseline buff to the characters, and then additionally, I would like to buff every sequence load on these characters, but we are specifically going to be talking about the S2s of these characters today. So the second sequence nodes. I really enjoy how Verina and Jianxin has really strong S2s that actually help them out a lot, because what this does is make you look forward to something that you can get later on, because at least you can build towards a stronger S2 standard banner character. The issue right now is that 3 out of 5 of the standard banner characters have incredibly lackluster sequence nodes. We're going to be talking baseline buffs and then an S2 buff as well for each character. Let's go ahead and get into it and start off with Encore. So Encore has this really cool inherent skill called Angry Cosmos, which reads as follows. During the Resonance Liberation Cosmos Wave, when Encore's HP is above 70%, damage dealt is increased by 10%. This is a really cool concept, to be honest. So it's going to be all about staying on high HP. And my baseline buff for Encore would be to play more into this. So I would increase the damage dealt by 25% instead of 10%. And I think this is really cool for multiple reasons. For one, it's very unique that a character has to stay high HP to deal damage. I don't think we have that in the game besides her. And then additionally, it plays into her existing synergies already. It plays into her playing with Showkeeper and Verina, but it also plays into her playing with Brand, who gives massive shields out so that she can stay high HP easier. It will make Encore significantly harder to play to stay at her full potential, of course, since you're gonna have to stay full HP during her ult. But to be fair, she's a ranged character, so I think it's doable. I think this would be a really cool buff that would make her much more viable, and it gives her a unique niche, which is what we're looking for when we're buffing older characters. We're not trying to make them direct competitors to current characters, because obviously we'd rather have every character feel unique. And now for Encore's S2, I would further increase this inherent skill damage by 10%, and then I would increase the ult duration by 5 seconds, so it would go from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Now, in general, adding 5 more seconds to a liberation doesn't really matter that much, because what ends up happening is that you overstay your rotation. I think Encore's rotations are fine as they are, but it certainly would help sometimes, and sometimes you want an extended rotation, and it would just give you more options essentially, right? But the main power lies in the extra 10% damage from her inherent skill again. So she would have a bunch of power inside of this stay above 70% health gimmick, which works nicely for her, as mentioned, because of her current teammates. So I think these buffs are really cool. I really like what I did with her. But yeah, let's move on to Lingyang. So Lingyang has this lion tribe kind of feel to him, in my opinion. And I think how we could play into that is add Glacier Rust Threat into his kit. So promote Mono Glacier for Lingyang. So an example team could be like Lingyang, Jessie, and Carlotta for him. And the way I would do that is probably give him Glacier Rust Threat inside of his ult, so that he can shred up to like 10% if he does this basic attack combos correctly in his ult. And I think that would be really cool, so he would be kind of a sub DPS for Carlotta. And yeah, I think that works out great for him. He'll play into the tribe field. We don't have a Mono Glacier team right now, and it would give him kind of a unique niche. Elemental Threat is kind of hard to play around with, because you need to know the numbers to know what's too broken and what's not. So I won't say that my numbers are correct here, but something like that would be really cool. And then additionally, his S2 would give him better multipliers in his ultimate. Basically just make him a more self-sustaining full-on DPS, so you can play him as a main carry without worrying so much about tanking his damage so much. So yeah, Lingyang, add some Glacier Rest Threat so that he gets a Mono Glacier team. That's what I would do for him. Next up is Verina. Obviously, Verina is the one standard banner character that doesn't need a buff, but one thing I do find interesting about Verina is that her S4 actually has Spectral Damage Amp, and so if there was anything I would add to Verina, it would probably be Spectral Damage Amp, either on her S1 or just on her baseline kit. And that way she would have this niche of playing with Spectral comps more, because that is one way she could separate herself from Showkeeper. Right now the only thing Verina has is her coordinated attacks, but they're just not that great. So adding Spectral Damage Amp somehow would be interesting, but obviously she doesn't need any buffs at all. So now next up we have Jianxin, and Jianxin has actually seen some play lately because of Yuno, and Jianxin buffs liberation damage. And I think what I would like to do for her is I would play more into this idea of playing with Yuno. So right now I believe she can shield, but what I would do is I would add a refreshing shield that can trigger around 4 times. The point would be that you could now have this combo of Yuno and Jianxin, could put a refreshing shield on somebody on the team, specifically the main DPS of the team, let's say Jian, and then this would trigger 4 times for Yuno's domain, so that the main DPS gets some value out of Yuno's domain. Because this is one of the main things that people complain about with Yuno, is that her domain is very specific to only August and Yuno. And that is true. Obviously it turned out that Yuno is still a really strong character, because she just has the damage numbers needed to be strong. But yeah, you would essentially make Jianxin a partner for Yuno, to then add a DPS onto that combo. And then you would have Yuno with the domain, Jianxin that can shield, the main DPS that will receive the shield and kind of make use of it, right? Because of Yuno's domain. So I think that's an interesting way to buffer. I'm not sure if that's the best for the game. I think it's interesting though, so let me know what you think about that one in the comments. And I'm not gonna buff Jianxin's S2, because that one is already pretty nice. It basically shortens your rotation by a bunch. It won't feel bad to pull, and that's kind of the point of these S2 buffs. I want S2 to feel good to pull. Like losing your 50-50 shouldn't feel that bad. And I already think it's quite nice for Jianxin, so let's move on to the final character, which is Calcharo. And Calcharo was the hardest one to think of a buff for, because he's just a very complex character to me. You guys can let me know what you think of this one as well. But what I would do is, one of Calcharo's inherent skills buffs Liberation Damage Amp. And the way you proc that is by doing his whole like 3 skills into heavy attack, which is part of his rotation, but it's still like a part that you'd really want him to do every rotation. So you could kind of play into the idea of him always doing that by adding this amp on his inherent skill. So right now it gives a 10% liberation damage increase, and we can just simply increase that to, you know, 20%, 30%. And then additionally, I would make more of his get liberation damage. I think that makes a lot of sense. And he plays with liberation damage supports. So I think what we should do is just make more of his get liberation damage, so he can take more advantage of a Yunlin or Jianxin on his team. And then for his S2, I would give him a big multiplier on this heavy attack that procs the liberation inherent skill. And then I would just give him like a flat 20% crit rate, for example. Because the thing about Calcharo is that he mostly plays with a broadblade without crit stats right now. So I think giving him 20% flat crit on his S2 would be very powerful, very good for him. That's what I would do for him. Play into his role of main DPS, of course. I think he should be a high by carry DPS. And giving him raw stats like that does play into that. Yeah, those are my ideas for buffs for the 5 standard banner 5-star characters. This was a lot of fun to make. I enjoyed it, and I hope they do buff these older characters, because they're really cool characters. It's really player friendly when the standard banner feels good to pull on. It shouldn't feel terrible to lose your 50-50s for the majority of your playtime. And the thing is, right now, as soon as you acquire S2 Verina, it's gonna feel bad to lose to any of the standard banner characters. Their sequence nodes are actual garbage. Like, they do absolutely nothing. S6 Calcharo is something like a 20% damage increase in total from S0. Obviously that's just nothing. So yeah, that's what I would like to see from Kuro Games. And I hope it's true that we're getting standard banner character buffs. Obviously this video is just meant to speculate and make some interesting ideas. I'm sure Kuro Games has their own ideas in mind. But yeah, that's about it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.